The most powerful thing you can do to impact the avoidant person is not maintaining radio silence, though silence is important. And it's not cutting off all contact, though boundaries are necessary. And it's not showing them your anger or your pain, though those feelings are valid. The most powerful thing you can do, the thing that will hurt them more deeply and more permanently than any of these strategies, is to visibly thrive without them, to become the best version of yourself, to live well and live loudly enough that evidence of your flourishing reaches them even through the distance you've created. Silence creates absence, which the avoidant can fill with whatever narrative serves their defensive system. They can tell themselves you're suffering in silence, that you're too hurt to speak, that you're stuck mourning what you lost. They can imagine you're worse off without them, that you need them even if you're not admitting it, that your silence is evidence of ongoing pain and attachment. But visible thriving destroys these comforting narratives completely. When you're not just absent, but are actively and observably building an amazing life without them, when they can see through social media or through mutual friends or through chance encounters that you're happy, successful, glowing, clearly better off, there's no narrative they can construct that protects their ego or minimizes their loss. Your thriving is undeniable evidence that you don't need them, that losing them wasn't the catastrophe to your life they might have hoped or assumed, that you're capable of creating joy and success and fulfillment entirely independent of them. This evidence penetrates their defenses in ways that silence never could, because it cannot be reinterpreted or explained away. You're not suffering. You're not stuck. You're not diminished by their absence. You're actually elevated, freed, thriving in ways you perhaps couldn't thrive while managing their patterns and their limitations. The avoidant person's deepest fear underneath all their defenses is that they don't matter, that they're not actually necessary, that people are better off without them. Your visible thriving confirms this fear while simultaneously making them recognize what they lost. Not someone who needed them and who would be broken without them, but someone who was whole and valuable and who chose to invest in them, but who was equally capable of choosing to invest elsewhere when they proved unworthy of that investment. This combination of recognizing they don't matter as much as they thought and recognizing they lost someone who was genuinely valuable is devastating to the avoidant in ways that hurt more than silence, because it's ongoing. Because every new achievement you reach, every new level of happiness you attain, every new way you demonstrate you're better without them is a fresh reminder of what they lost and what they couldn't provide and what they destroyed through their patterns. Why visible thriving penetrates their defenses deeper than absence. The avoidant person has a well-developed defensive system that can manage and minimize the impact of your silence or your absence. But visible thriving penetrates these defenses in ways that create unavoidable psychological impact. Understanding why thriving is more powerful than silence reveals both the nature of the avoidance defenses and the most effective way to ensure your departure creates lasting recognition of what they lost. Visible thriving penetrates their defenses because it provides concrete, undeniable evidence that contradicts the narratives they construct to protect themselves from the pain of loss. When you're silent and absent, the avoidance defensive system can create stories that minimize the loss or that protect their ego. They can tell themselves you're suffering too much to contact them, that you're angry but will eventually calm down, that you're trying to make them jealous but are actually miserable, that you need them even if you're pretending you don't. These defensive narratives allow them to avoid fully confronting what they lost and their responsibility for losing it. But when you're visibly thriving, posting about your achievements, appearing happy in photos, clearly engaging with life in joyful ways, these narratives collapse. They cannot tell themselves you're suffering when you're obviously happy. They cannot pretend you need them when you're obviously complete without them. They cannot minimize the loss when the evidence shows you're better off. The concrete reality of your thriving forces them to confront truths their defensive system wants to avoid. Visible thriving penetrates their defenses because it activates comparison and competition that the avoidant cannot suppress, forcing them to measure their own life against yours and recognize they're losing that comparison. The avoidant often has a competitive streak underneath their dismissive exterior. They want to believe they're doing better than their ex-partners, that their choice to prioritize independence and to avoid commitment is serving them well. When you're absent, but your life is unknown, they can imagine they're doing better than you, that their life is fuller or happier or more successful. But when your thriving is visible, when they can see your actual life and compare it to their own, the comparison becomes unavoidable. If you're clearly happier, more successful, more socially connected, more at peace than they are, they cannot maintain the fantasy that they're winning or that leaving you was a good decision. The forced comparison creates pain that silence doesn't create, because silence leaves room for imagination, while visible thriving provides a reality that's often worse than whatever they imagined. Visible thriving penetrates their defenses because it proves that you were never the problem, that the relationship's dysfunction was about their limitations, not about your inadequacy, forcing recognition of their responsibility. Throughout the relationship, the avoidant likely constructed narratives that blamed you for the problems. You were too needy, too emotional, too demanding, wanted too much closeness. These narratives protected them from having to acknowledge their own patterns as problematic. Your silence after the breakup doesn't necessarily challenge these narratives, but your visible thriving does. If you were too needy or too limited, you wouldn't thrive without them. If you were the problem, you'd struggle in their absence. But you're not struggling. You're flourishing. This flourishing proves that you weren't too needy. You were with someone who couldn't meet normal needs. You weren't too emotional. You were responding normally to abnormal patterns. The problem was their capacity, not your character. This forced recognition of their responsibility is more painful than your silence because it attacks their defensive narratives at their foundation. Visible thriving penetrates their defenses because it triggers their loss aversion and their scarcity response more powerfully than absence alone, making them want what they can see they've lost more intensely than they wanted what they had. The avoidant often devalues what's available and desires what's unavailable. When you're simply absent, you're unavailable, but you're also unknown. They don't know what they're missing in concrete terms. But when you're visibly thriving, they can see exactly what they're missing. They can see the happy, successful, attractive person you've become. They can see the life you're living that doesn't include them. They can see what they could have had if they'd been capable of showing up. This visibility makes the loss concrete rather than abstract, and it triggers intense desire for what they can clearly see but cannot have. The pain of wanting what you can see but cannot access is more intense than the pain of missing something abstract or undefined. Visible thriving penetrates their defenses because it demonstrates that you've moved on, not just physically, but emotionally and psychologically, proving that their importance to you has genuinely ended rather than being temporarily suppressed. Silence can be interpreted as you holding your feelings in, as you protecting yourself while still caring deeply. The avoidant can maintain hope that you still love them, that you're just hurt, that time might bring you back. But visible thriving communicates something different. You've genuinely moved on. You're not holding your breath. You're not stuck in the past. You're not organizing your life around the loss of them. You're living fully and happily in a present that doesn't include them and in a future that has no space for them. This recognition that they're genuinely irrelevant to your emotional life now, that you've actually released them rather than just creating physical distance, is more painful than silence because silence can coexist with ongoing attachment, while genuine thriving demonstrates detachment. Visible thriving penetrates their defenses because it creates ongoing, repeated impact rather than a single moment of loss, with each new achievement or happiness milestone creating a fresh reminder of what they lost. Your silence creates an impact when you first implement it, when they realize you're not responding and you're serious about being done. But after the initial impact, Silence is static. It doesn't create new pain, just ongoing absence. But visible thriving creates repeated impacts over time. Each time they see a new photo of you looking happy, each time they hear through mutual friends about your promotion or your new relationship or your amazing trip, each achievement and milestone creates fresh pain and fresh recognition of loss. The impact compounds rather than fading because your continued success and happiness keeps proving over and over that you're better without them. This repeated impact is more painful than the single impact of silence because it doesn't allow them to process the loss and move on. It keeps reopening the wound with new evidence of what they're missing. Visible thriving penetrates their defenses because it forces them to witness the life you're living that could have been shared with them if they'd been capable, making their loss concrete in terms of specific experiences and moments rather than an abstract sense of missing a person. When you're silent, they miss the idea of you. When you're thriving visibly, they see specific things they're missing. The trip you took that you could have taken together, the achievement you reached that they could have celebrated with you, the happiness you're experiencing that could have included them. This concreteness makes the loss more painful because they can imagine exactly what they're missing, can picture themselves in the life you're living, can see what their patterns cost them in specific rather than abstract terms. The specific forms of success that create maximum impact. Not all forms of thriving create equal impact on the avoidant person. Certain types of visible success and happiness penetrate their defenses more deeply and create more lasting pain than others. Understanding which forms of thriving hurt the most allows you to recognize what aspects of your growth and success will have the greatest effect, though the primary motivation should always be your own fulfillment rather than their pain. The form of success that creates maximum impact is visible, genuine happiness that radiates from you in photos, in person, in how you carry yourself. Happiness that clearly comes from internal peace rather than from external validation. The avoidant can dismiss external success as performance or as compensation for unhappiness. They can tell themselves you're achieving things but aren't actually happy, that you're filling the void they left with accomplishments that don't truly satisfy. But genuine happiness that's visible in your energy, in your smile, in how you show up in the world cannot be dismissed as easily. When they see you and you're glowing, when your joy is obvious and authentic, when you're clearly at peace in ways you weren't while managing their patterns, this creates undeniable recognition that you're better off. Happiness proves that losing them was liberation rather than loss. And this proof hurts because it means they were a burden rather than a blessing, a limitation rather than an enhancement to your life. The form of success that creates maximum impact is romantic success with someone new who clearly treats you better and who you clearly care for, demonstrating that you found what you needed with someone who has capacity they lacked. The avoidant might be able to accept that you're doing well professionally or that you're happy with friends and hobbies. But seeing you with a new partner, especially a partner who is clearly more emotionally available, more consistent, more capable of showing up, creates specific pain that other successes don't create. It proves you didn't need them specifically, that you're capable of forming attachment with someone else, that someone else can provide what they couldn't. The combination of seeing you happy with someone new and recognizing that person is a better partner than they were creates jealousy and regret that's more intense than other forms of success create. It forces recognition not just that they lost you, but that someone else gained you, that you're giving to someone else the love and care you offered them. The form of success that creates maximum impact is social success, where you're clearly surrounded by people who value you, where you're central to friend groups and communities, proving you're not isolated or diminished, but are valued and wanted. The avoidant might have assumed or hoped that their withdrawal from your life would leave you somewhat isolated, would reveal that you were dependent on them for social connection or validation. But when they see you surrounded by friends, see evidence of a robust social life, see that you're clearly valued and included in communities and circles, it proves the opposite. You don't need them for social fulfillment. You have people who value you and want you around. This proof that you're not isolated or struggling socially, but are actually thriving in community, challenges any narrative they had about being your primary source of connection and forces recognition that you're genuinely valued by many people, not just by them. The form of success that creates maximum impact is personal transformation, where you have visibly grown, healed, and evolved beyond who you were during the relationship, demonstrating that you use the pain of losing them as a catalyst for profound positive change. When the avoidant sees that you've lost weight or gotten in better shape, that you've developed new skills or pursued new interests, that you've clearly done therapeutic work and are more grounded and confident, that you've transformed yourself in visible ways, it creates recognition that the relationship ending was your beginning rather than your ending. You didn't just survive their loss, you used it to become a better version of yourself. This transformation is painful for them to witness because it proves their patterns didn't break you, but actually freed you to become more of who you're meant to be. That the energy you were spending managing their limitations is now invested in yourself with obvious positive results. The form of success that creates maximum impact is achievement of specific goals you discussed during the relationship that they were perhaps unsupportive of, or that you couldn't pursue fully while managing their patterns. If you talked about wanting to start a business and now you've successfully launched one, if you mentioned wanting to travel to a specific place and now you've been there, if you expressed goals they dismissed or couldn't support and you've now achieved those goals without them, it creates specific recognition that you didn't need their support to succeed, that their absence allowed you to pursue what matters to you, that you're capable of achieving what you set out to achieve independently. This specific achievement of discussed goals hurts because it proves you didn't need them and might have actually been held back by them. The form of success that creates maximum impact is visible peace and groundedness that contrasts sharply with any anxiety or people-pleasing you displayed during the relationship, proving that you were different with them because of their patterns rather than because of your nature. If you were anxious during the relationship, often seeking reassurance, working hard to maintain connection, and now you're clearly calm and secure, it proves that your anxiety was a situational response to their inconsistency rather than your baseline state. If you were people-pleasing and accommodating during the relationship, and now you're clearly boundaried and self-assured, it proves you were adapting to them rather than being authentically yourself. This contrast between who you were with them and who you are without them forces recognition that the relationship brought out a worse version of you rather than the best version, that their patterns created the very behaviors they might have criticized, and that you're more yourself and a better version of yourself without them. The form of success that creates maximum impact is generosity and kindness toward others that's visible in how you show up for friends, family, community, demonstrating that you have tremendous capacity to care for and support others when those others deserve and reciprocate that care. If the avoidant saw your emotional generosity and your capacity to care but couldn't receive it, or couldn't reciprocate it, seeing you offer that same capacity to others who do reciprocate creates specific pain. It proves that your capacity to love and care wasn't the problem. Their capacity to receive and reciprocate was the problem. Seeing you be an amazing friend, supportive family member, engaged community participant forces recognition that you have so much to offer and that they were incapable of receiving it or deserving it. This recognition that others are benefiting from the care they rejected or couldn't handle is uniquely painful. How your evolution forces recognition they cannot avoid. Your visible thriving and evolution after leaving the avoidant creates specific forms of unavoidable recognition that penetrate their defenses and force them to confront truths about the relationship, about themselves, and about what they lost. Understanding these forced recognitions reveals why thriving is more impactful than silence, and why your evolution creates pain they cannot escape. Your evolution forces recognition that you were never the problem in the relationship, that the dysfunction was about their patterns and limitations rather than about your character or your needs. Throughout the relationship, the avoidant constructed narratives that placed responsibility on you. Your needs were too much. Your emotions were too intense. Your expectations were unrealistic. These narratives protected them from confronting their own limitations. But when you thrive after leaving, when you're clearly happy and successful and functioning well, it demolishes these narratives. If you were the problem, you wouldn't thrive without them. If your needs were too much, you wouldn't find fulfillment elsewhere. If you were too emotional or too needy, you wouldn't appear so balanced and content. Now, your thriving proves that you're capable and whole, that you function well when you're not managing someone else's patterns, that the problems in the relationship were about what they couldn't provide rather than about what you wrongly demanded. Your evolution forces recognition that they held you back rather than supported your growth, that you're achieving more and becoming more without them than you could with them. If you're visibly more successful, happier, more accomplished after leaving than you were during the relationship, it proves that the relationship was limiting you rather than enhancing you. The avoidant cannot avoid recognizing that you're better off without them, that their presence in your life was a constraint rather than support, that the energy and time you invested in managing their patterns is now invested in yourself with obvious positive results. This recognition that they were an obstacle to your thriving rather than a contributor to it is painful because it inverts whatever narrative they held about being a valuable partner or important presence in your life. Your evolution forces recognition that you didn't need them for happiness or completeness, that you're fully capable of creating a fulfilling life independently. The avoidant might have assumed or hoped that you needed them, that they were essential to your happiness, that losing them would leave a meaningful gap. But your visible thriving proves you're complete without them, that you create your own happiness, that you're fully capable of building a satisfying life that doesn't require them or anyone else to complete it. This recognition that you're genuinely independent and self-sufficient, that you don't need them despite having wanted them, is painful because it challenges their importance and proves they're not necessary for your well-being. Your evolution forces recognition that you've moved on, not just physically, but emotionally, that you've genuinely released them rather than holding on to attachment while maintaining distance. When the avoidant sees you thriving, clearly invested in your present life, clearly happy and engaged without them, it proves you're not stuck in the past, not still attached, not secretly hoping for reconciliation. You've genuinely moved forward. This recognition that you've emotionally released them, that they no longer occupy significant space in your heart or mind, is painful because it means they truly lost you, not just physically, but emotionally, that there's no hidden attachment they could potentially appeal to or exploit. Your evolution forces recognition of the specific timeline where you've grown and improved while they've remained stagnant, creating a painful comparison of diverging life trajectories. If months or years have passed and you've clearly evolved, become healthier, happier, more successful, more grounded, while they're essentially the same or worse, the comparison is unavoidable. They see you rising while they see themselves stuck. They recognize that time has been kind to you and has revealed your capacity for growth, while the same time has revealed their stagnation and their inability or unwillingness to change. This recognition of diverging trajectories, where you're ascending while they're flat or declining, creates pain that compounds over time because the gap keeps widening. Your evolution forces recognition that their patterns are genuinely destructive and that their defensive strategies don't actually serve them or lead to good outcomes. When the avoidant sees that you're thriving after leaving the relationship, after leaving their patterns, it proves that those patterns were damaging, that being in relationship with their defended, avoidant self was limiting and harmful. If they're honest with themselves, your thriving forces recognition that their patterns destroyed something valuable, that their defensive strategies don't actually protect them from pain, but create it. that the very things they do to feel safe actually make them unsafe and alone. This recognition that their entire defensive structure is counterproductive is deeply threatening to their psychological organization and creates a crisis they cannot fully avoid when confronted with evidence of your thriving. Your evolution forces recognition that you were a valuable person they lost through their own choices, that the loss was preventable and was their fault. When you're visibly thriving, clearly valuable, obviously someone any healthy person would want to be with, the avoidant cannot maintain illusions that you were flawed or inadequate, or that leaving you was cutting their losses. You're clearly valuable. You're clearly someone desirable. You're clearly someone who enriches the lives of people who can receive what you offer. This forces recognition that losing you is a genuine loss of a valuable person, that the loss was preventable if they'd been capable of showing up differently, that they're responsible for destroying something precious through their own patterns and limitations. Your evolution forces recognition that other people are now receiving the best of you, the love and care and investment you offered them that they couldn't receive, creating a painful awareness of what they rejected and what others are enjoying. When the avoidant sees you thriving in a new relationship or in rich friendships or in engaged community participation, they're forced to recognize that your capacity to love and care and invest in others is now directed elsewhere. The understanding and acceptance you offered them, the patience you showed, the care you provided, all of this is now given to others who can receive it and reciprocate it. This recognition that others are benefiting from what they rejected creates unique pain because it's not just abstract loss, but concrete recognition that what they had and couldn't handle is now enjoyed by others who deserve it. Why this approach serves you first and affects them second. The most important aspect of choosing visible thriving as your response to the avoidant is that this approach serves your healing and your growth primarily, with the impact on them being a secondary consequence rather than the primary goal. Understanding this proper ordering of priorities ensures you're thriving authentically for yourself rather than performing thriving for their benefit.